So when I was about 17 or 18 years old, I went through a very profound awakening. And at first, it started out mostly in my inner experiences and in my dreams. And then as I moved into my early to mid-20s, my life began to take some really unexpected turns. And it became more palpable in my external world. So the way that this whole spiritual path, the way that it all really popped off for me, as I started off having these really profound dreams. And I would have these dreams of going to where many people might call heaven. And I would also have these dreams of having these conversations with what people might call guides or angels. And these guides would tell me things about my life. And I started having these dreams when I was in college. And at the time, I was going to get my bachelor's degree in music. And my instrument was classical guitar, in case anybody's curious. And it was my plan to go on to get my master's and then to get my doctorate. And my goal was to go ahead and land a nice, cushy teaching job at a university teaching music. And then I could pursue all my creative endeavors on the side. And I was totally 110% just committed to this. I mean, I was practicing guitar like 8 hours a day, and I've been planning this out since I was 14 years old. And it was just like, this is what I'm gonna do with my life, period, no questions asked, this is it. And so, my very last year of college, right when I was about to graduate, I had one of these really profound dreams where this guide came to me. And he came to me in the form of this older man. And he was kind of like this elder. And he felt very much like a mentor to me. And in the dream, he sat across from me. And he looked at me. And he said, "So Michael, tell me, what is it that you are going to do with your life?" And I was just like, well, I know the answer to that question. I've been planning this out since I was 14 years old. And so I gave him my whole spiel. I told him what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, when it was going to happen, all the details, all the steps. And as I told him this, he just kind of looked at me in the dream, and he was just like, okay. And he was very patient. And then he just kind of looked through me. And then he stopped speaking to me in words, and he started speaking to me telepathically. And he said, "So everything that you think you are doing with your life, you're not actually going to do." And then he said, "There's a position that I'm going to be putting you in. And it's a position of leadership. And you're not ready for it now. And you're not going to be ready for a while. But I want you to know that you are about to begin the process of preparing yourself for this position. And so as you move forward in your path, I just want you to know that everything that you think you are doing with your life, you're not actually going to do." That was my dream. And then this was followed by another dream where I was shown a book of my life. And as I flipped through the pages of this book, I saw different scenes. And I saw my past, I saw my present, and I saw my future. And as I looked into my past, I saw how all of these seemingly random and insignificant events, all of these things from my upbringing and my childhood that I thought were totally meaningless, I saw that they were all strategically set up and orchestrated so that my life would unfold in a particular way. And then when I looked into my future, I saw these scenes from my life that would apparently occur as I got older. And it was really funny because at the time of having this dream, I was one of the most terrified and insecure people that you would have ever met in your life. I mean, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of going to the grocery store and having to have a conversation with somebody. I mean, that's how terrified I was of life. And it was just ironic because in the dream it showed me on stage, speaking in front of groups, with great confidence and openness. But at the time of having this dream, that's something I never, ever, ever would have put on myself in a million years. And so, ironically enough, here I am with you, right in this moment. And so this is kind of the wave that I've been riding for the past several years. And so the reason why I'm sharing this with you is for two main reasons. One, it kind of gives you an idea as to who I am and where I'm coming from in my path and where I'm at. And also, the reason why I'm sharing this is because my own personal process is part of a much larger process, much larger universal process that each and every single one of us is currently in the midst of undergoing, whether we're fully conscious of this or not. So, in sharing my story, it serves as a reflection into your own unfolding. Because we all go through the same thing. We all go through the same process. We just go through it in our own unique way. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, upon having these dreams, right, I didn't know what the hell to do about them. I was just like, okay, so apparently I'm not going to do what I thought I was doing with my life. So then what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? What do I do with that? What do I do with this information? So, guess what I did? Totally swept it under the rug. I totally blew it off. I was like, you know what? I have a lot of dreams. Some of them are pretty weird, and I know they all don't mean something, right? So whatever. They're just dreams. They don't mean anything. So I continued down this path that I've been planning out since I was 14. And sure enough, the more I moved down this path, the more empty and meaningless it began to feel. And so eventually I just left it behind altogether and I took a dive down the rabbit hole. And I took a leap of faith. Guess what happened when I took my leap of faith? Anybody want to guess?
Here you are.
Here I am.
You fell.
What's that?
You fell.
I fell flat on my face. I crashed and burned hard. Yeah. So upon taking this leap of faith, I went through a phase of complete and utter confusion and disorientation that lasted for several years on end, where I didn't know what was up, I didn't know what was down, I didn't know left from right, I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I didn't know what I was supposed to do, just completely and utterly lost. Like, lost. And believe it or not, these phases of disorientation are actually a very natural part of our growth and of our evolution. Because I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but right when people are on the verge of a major spiritual awakening, it's always sort of heralded by their life totally falling apart. Have you guys ever noticed that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you probably experienced it. And the reason why this happens is because we spend a substantial fraction of our lives building up our personality structures, building up our conditioning, what many people might call our ego, right? And we don't just build it up, but we deliberately try to strengthen it. Where we go and we learn how to make money, we learn how to support a family, how to hold a job, we learn how to act in public, we learn how not to act in public. We learn the ways of the world, right? And then eventually we get to a point in our path where we're like, yeah, you know what? I think there's actually more to life than this. And then we end up breaking down the cocoon of our conditioning and allowing our innermost radiance to shine forth. But when we're in that space of breaking down the walls of our conditioning, that internal process is often reflected externally as your life totally falling apart. And so as we move through our growth, we periodically go through these phases of disorientation, right? Usually right when we're on the cusp of a major breakthrough in our lives. It's almost rhythmic. You can pretty much predict it when you're in these cycles. And so today I feel very called to speak about these phases of disorientation that we find ourselves in. And I feel called to speak about them for a couple of reasons. Okay? One, if you're on the spiritual path, or if you're just in life, you've either been through this before, you are going through it now, or you're going to go through it again to some varying degree in the future. Another reason why I feel called to speak about these phases is because these are often the phases of our life that are the most tumultuous, the most misunderstood, the most isolating, and the most painful. And if we can understand what is actually being called of us when we're in these phases of life, then we can learn how to relate to ourselves in a much more loving and constructive way. Okay? So today I'm going to be talking about what is actually being called of us when we're in these phases of disorientation. Does all this make sense so far? Okay. So every single experience that we find ourselves in, no matter what it is, it always has its higher function. Always, to every experience, right? And so the higher function of disorientation is to help liberate you from your need to understand. The higher purpose of disorientation is to help liberate you from your need to understand. Okay? And don't get me wrong, because our understanding has its proper time and its place in our lives, just like anything else does. But it's also important to recognize when our own understanding is used against ourselves. Okay? And when I'm talking about understanding, what I'm talking about is our understanding of the way we think life is supposed to be. Or our understanding of the way we think things are supposed to play out. Or our understanding of who we think we are. And who we think other people are. Right? And so one of the ways our understanding is used against ourselves is when our consciousness is evolving at such a rapid pace, and then our level of understanding isn't quite moving as fast as our level of consciousness, then it creates this schism within us, and eventually something's just gotta give, right? Another way that our understanding is used against ourselves is when our understanding is not properly balanced with the quality of faith. And when our understanding is not properly balanced with faith, then we become too overly dependent on our own understanding. And then we end up cutting ourselves off from the higher rhythms of life that are actually attempting to operate through us. And then we end up fighting against our own evolution. Okay? And so, if we are to compare our own understanding to faith, faith will always carry you much farther than your own understanding ever will. I'm going to say that again. Your faith will always carry you much farther than your own understanding ever will. Miracles do not occur within the context of your understanding. That's why they're called miracles. Miracles only occur within the reality of your faith. Faith. And so when I'm speaking about faith, what I'm talking about is this deep knowing that everything that arises in your life is always connected to a much higher process that is always operating in your favor. Period. End of story. Everything that shows up in your life is always operating in your favor. So that means every single experience that you find yourself in, no matter how seemingly negative or uncomfortable it appears to be, it always eventually gets utilized for the sake of your empowerment. Always. Always. There's no exceptions to that rule. That's always the case. And oftentimes, it's our own understanding that actually eclipses the simplicity of that knowing. Your faith will always carry you much farther than your own understanding ever will. And since faith is such an important quality for us to cultivate, the universe tries to give us ample opportunity to cultivate faith. That's why life throws us the curveballs that it does. These things way out of left field, where we're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. You know, throws us off balance, throws us off traction, throws us into total confusion, into disorientation. And then we go into this space where we're like, I don't understand why this is happening to me. You know, raise your hand if you've ever been there. Yeah. I don't understand why this is happening. I don't understand how these circumstances in my life are going to work themselves out. God, I just don't understand, right? And when we're in this space, there's this tendency for us to think that our lack of understanding is the result of some kind of failure on our end. Where we think because we don't understand what's going on, there's some kind of lack in our perception or in ourselves. Or there's something we're not seeing. Or we think that God is punishing us for something that we've done in the past. God's going to come down and spank our butts a little bit. You know? Or we think that we're just failing some kind of lesson that the universe is trying to teach us. Because apparently if we were succeeding at life, then we would understand what's going on and we would understand how everything's going to play out, right? It's like, dude, that's ridiculous. And so I'm going to tell you that in most cases, none of these things are actually ever true. Okay? These are just things that we project onto what's really going on. Okay? And the reason why I know this is because I've been lost in this cycle about 1 million times. Okay? And so if you're in this space where you don't understand what the hell is going on, and you don't understand how the situations in your life are going to work themselves out, then guess what? Maybe you're just not meant to understand. Because maybe your understanding is actually not the point of the experience that you're having. Because maybe your own understanding is actually the very thing that's getting in the way of what actually needs to happen for your highest evolution to occur. So maybe, just maybe, your understanding is actually the very thing that the universe is trying to free you from in those moments, which is why you don't understand. The universe is trying to make more room in your life so that you can relax into faith. The universe is trying to loosen the grip of your understanding so that there's actually more room in your life for miracles to occur. Because remember, miracles do not occur within the context of your understanding. That's why they're called miracles. Miracles only occur within the reality of your faith. Faith. And so to bring this whole talk full circle, how this leap of faith looked for me, and this is going to look different for everybody, but keep in mind we're all going through the same process. What this looked like for me was the very day that I was supposed to pay my tuition to go to graduate school, to go on to get my master's degree, I ended up not paying it and taking off on a road trip across the country with a girlfriend of mine at the time. And keep in mind, I had never done anything like this before in my life. That was a pretty big leap. And our goal was to go from South Carolina, that's where we started, to California. And to make a very long story very short, it was a totally magical trip. I mean, it was full of so much beauty and so much wonder and so many synchronicities. I mean, it was like stepping into a fairy tale. It was incredible. And I was totally in love with this girl at the time. I thought she was my soulmate, and there was this whole thing around it. And once again, to make a very long story very short, this beautiful fairy tale that I had stepped into ended in total tragedy and devastation. And so basically what happened in a nutshell was we got halfway across the country and my girlfriend ended up going to jail for something really silly. The van that I was living out of and traveling out of ended up breaking down on top of a mountain, and I ended up with virtually no money to my name. Like totally like broke and homeless and didn't have any place to go. Totally alone. And so what I did is I went into the nearest town and I got a job as a server at a restaurant. And I was like, okay, I'm going to save up enough money to get myself together, to get this van fixed, and I'm going to wait for my girlfriend to get out of jail. She was only in there for a couple months, and we're going to get back home. And so I ended up working at this restaurant, and I basically was living there pretty much. I mean, I was working like 10, 11, 12 hours a day and like up to 70 hours a week. I mean, just totally like committed to it. And so I'd go and I'd work and I'd work and I'd work, and then I'd go and I'd get off and I'd go sleep behind a grocery store or on a park bench, or I'd go sleep behind some business, some random place where people weren't going to mess with me. And then I'd get up and I'd go to work again. And there was one day in particular that I will never forget, where it was this day after I had worked like 12 days in a row and was totally just raw and exhausted for this whole experience, I had a total breakdown, like a public breakdown. And I was in the middle of this like shopway where people were walking back and forth, and I was just like, I lost it, and I was just like bawling and I was in tears and just like, just like my face like buried in the pavement, just like I cracked. I mean, I cracked open. And there was a lot going on. You know, one, I was just exhausted and raw from the whole experience, and two, I was just like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I had this whole life mapped out since I was 14 years old, and now my girlfriend's in jail, and I'm like homeless, and I'm working in this restaurant. Like, what the hell is going on? You know? Just totally confused. And so I'm having this total like breakdown in tears, and people are just like walking by like, what's up with this dude? You know? And so this police officer comes up to me, and he's like, okay, first thing, we don't allow homeless people here. You're gonna have to go. Second off, you can't be having a mental breakdown in the middle of public, okay? You are freaking people out. These people just called the cops on you, you know? And I just like looked at him and I had like tears in my eyes. It's just like, and I was just like totally broken. And he saw something in me. He saw I was a good guy. And he was just like, you know what, here's $20, go get some food. If we catch you out here again, we're gonna have to take you away, okay? So I was like, okay. He was actually really cool. And so basically I ended up saving enough money, getting my van fixed. My girlfriend got out of jail. We went back home, South Carolina. And guess what happened as soon as we got back? This girl ended up leaving me.
Imagine that.
Yeah, she ended up breaking up with me, and then I ended up moving back in with my parents and was trying to apply to grad school again. And I emailed this professor back and was like, hey, I'm sorry, I blew you off and I didn't pay. You know, I don't know what I was thinking. Some stuff came up, and I went through this whole process of rebuilding my life. And as I moved through this process, guess what? It just felt more meaningless and dead than it did the first time around. And then I got into this space where I was just like, oh shit. What am I doing with my life? I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm living with my parents. I have no money. I feel totally alone. I have no direction. What am I doing? And I spiraled into one of the deepest depressions that I had ever known up to that point. And in order to keep myself from spiraling too far, I picked up painting. And because it was the only thing I knew to do that would kind of still my mind enough to get myself out of my mental chatter. And so I became obsessed. And I painted obsessively. And if you would walk in my room at that time, you would see my room was just covered in artwork. I mean, I was obsessed. And so I slowly started taking my artwork out into schools, into festivals, into events, gatherings, so on and so forth. And I slowly got myself out there as an artist. And then I'd go and I'd connect with people at these events, and they liked me, and they were like, oh, have you ever thought about doing a presentation on art and creativity? And slowly I started giving these talks, and so the art became a platform for my speaking, and now my speaking is a central focus of what I do. So some of my greatest gifts, okay, the treasures that were buried deep inside of me, were totally birthed out of this phase of complete and utter disorientation and confusion. And there's no way I could have planned this out. This whole process of my personal revelation has had virtually nothing to do with my own understanding. But it's had everything to do with my faith. And so I'm going to tell you that each and every single one of you has a treasure that inherently lies within you. And this treasure yearns with everything that it is to be revealed and expressed through you. And in your own process of personal revelation, it has very little to do with your own understanding. But it has everything to do with your faith. Miracles do not occur within the context of your understanding. They occur within the reality of your faith. Faith.